Up, y'all? Welcome back to another episode of the Non-Standard Podcast. I'm your host, Manny Lamson. This is my co-host, Teddy, who's going to be making some interactions on this episode. But I just wanted to go over, today is a special guest, Tim Montjoy. He is a friend of mine. He is the founder of Operation Teammate, a nonprofit organization that he established while in the military. He did 20 years in the Air Force. And today we talk about one of the questions I was really curious about was how he got into wanting to start a nonprofit, wanting to start a business while in the military, and how he got going on that journey and what has kept him along that journey as well. So like I said, if you take anything from this, it's pretty simple. All you got to do is save, share, like, or follow. Do what you got to do. And I'm also curious for any of those watching on YouTube, whatever college you went to, drop it below. Obviously, I went to Washington State University, so drop some comments below on what college you went to. If you have any questions, the easiest way to reach out to me is just on Instagram, Manny Mustache. But let's get into this episode because it's a good one, and go enjoy. Sounds good. All right, everybody, what is up? Welcome back to another episode of the Non-Standard Podcast. As you heard in the intro, I'm Manny. I'm with my man, Tim. And I'm always like super excited every time I start a podcast because just like I told Tim before, I get to learn things about the people I have on that I didn't know before, and I've known them for multiple years, but it's just never been brought up. So Tim sent me over his bio and background today, and I was just like, oh, man, I'm so excited. Just like I said in the intro, Tim runs Operation Teammate. He just developed an app as well that he's pushing out there, and it's growing and moving. And the big thing we're going to try to cover and discuss today is the transition from the military into that passion of a nonprofit, the business side of it, which is funny, the ruck I had this morning with my friend, we're in the process of trying to develop a nonprofit, and we have come to find out the military, it doesn't really do a great job setting people up for like that passion, right? As like a business. And so we're in this sort of area of like, how do we do this? Who do we talk to? The military really just sets you up to fill a position in a job after the military. It doesn't really help you start something. And so it is cool that we had this set up today because that was sort of what I talked about on my ruck. And there'll be some questions I bring up with you today. But let's get going. Tim, just like most people are familiar with, we're going to start off with 3 H's. Awesome. Hometown, heroes, and hardships to get the juices going. Then we'll talk about your career a little bit and then dive into really that big transition from the military to nonprofits to really starting your own business and app and all those crazy questions I have for you. All right, let's go.
Awesome.
All you.
Okay, yeah. Well, thank you very much for having me. I didn't know you want me to start, but yeah. I'm Timothy Montjoy, retired from the United States Air Force. Obviously, with the Operation Teammate background, we deal with families from all services. So I get to tease all the, fellow branches of the military that I'm retired from the Air Force, and they're still either active duty, Guard, Reserve, and again, you obviously understand kind of bantering back and forth amongst service members. We can kind of do that, right? A lot of people kind of tease the Air Force just based on historical culture. We have a higher ops tempo now, but a lot of people try to tease the Air Force. But yeah, I'm retired from the Air Force, grew up in Jonesboro, Georgia, joined the Air Force in 1996, and one thing led to another. And as you obviously can attest to, 20 years goes by in a blink of an eye, right? And retired in 2016. And prior to my retirement, kind of going back to when I came back from Korea in 2003, I became a single parent full-time, once I came back. And as my daughter and I were growing up in the Air Force together, we did a lot of giving back and community service, both on base and off base. And once we were getting close to retirement, we knew we wanted to do something to continue that service and hopefully impact. At the time, we didn't know exactly what we wanted to do. But based on some brainstorming and just kind of thinking through the process, it was kind of a no-brainer that we wanted to do something to support or hopefully impact military children, just based on the fact that it was basically her and I, and my mom was a huge help throughout my career while I was a single parent. And so about a year before I retired, we created this concept around Operation Teammate. And the reason I kind of put it like that is we didn't have a name for it. We just knew we wanted to do something for military kids. And then we started thinking, okay, how are we going to do that? What is going to be our attention step? What's going to get the kids interested? And what's going to put the kids in a positive environment to hopefully make a lasting impact? So that's kind of where we decided on the sports space. Hence kind of an overarching philosophy, if you will, behind the name Operation Teammate, which kind of ties in the military aspect as well as kind of the team aspect within sports or athletics, right? And when we first started doing our events with Operation Teammate, it was really kind of just an opportunity to give the military kids a timeout, or even get their mind off of mom or dad or both being away from home. But fairly quickly, based on feedback from the teams and the parents, on game day, as you obviously are personally aware of, on game day, an athlete's job is to perform. So their extracurricular flexibility is probably just not there, right? And rightfully so. They need to be focused on the job at hand, which is game day. So fairly quickly, our focus kind of shifted from game day events to non-game day practice scenarios, or kind of just special opportunities for a small group of military kids. And that's kind of worked out a lot better, because kind of one of our goals when we do our events is to make sure that all the kids feel included, they're getting something out of it, and there's something that resonates with them as a lasting impact opportunity. And again, on game day, it's fun and the games are exciting to watch. Just that personal one-on-one interaction and kind of storytelling just isn't there. So when we do practice scenarios or non-game day activities, it really provides an opportunity for all the kids to feel included, be able to interact with the athletes and actually pay attention and get something out of the storytelling based on the success journeys of our athletes. And up to this point, we've done 73 events. We did our first event in December of 2015. And we just completed our month of the military child, which is every April. And we did a handful of events this April, which ended up being our 73rd total event. We were really on track to hit 100 by now. And the reason I mentioned that is historically we did about 7 or 8 events a year per calendar year. And then in 2019, we did 18 events in that one calendar year alone. And then we were going to use that momentum to kind of push us into 2020. And then everything kind of came to a screeching halt just based on the pandemic, and rightfully so, right? I mean, it was kind of an unknown opportunity, and we wouldn't want to put the families or the kids in an uncomfortable position. And then that being said, kind of like most businesses, we kind of incorporated a kind of virtual opportunity, right? Which is actually where we kind of first made contact with you and your phenomenal family.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think the first time we heard about you, and I think it was at a sports comm in Dallas.
Oh, yeah.
There was a random event, and I don't think I knew about Operation Teammate then. We went to it, and I think guys just pushed it out like, hey, there's this event in Dallas, and that's where we ran into, I think it was Vince Young, and I think it was Johnny Manziel were there. So we got to talk. There was like a Patriots guy that my wife taught yoga to. There were just all these athletes, and obviously being a big sports fan, with our whole family being a wide range of sports athletes and favorite teams, we all went there, and that's where we heard about Operation Teammate. And then I sort of followed up with you after. Yeah. And then that's where we had the amazing opportunities during COVID, where you took advantage of, that COVID atmosphere. We had the Brantley Gilbert session that I was just telling somebody about, which was really cool. Yep. We had the ice shaker with Chris Gronkowski, which was really cool. And then, let's see, those were the two big ones. And then, we just kept following and keeping in touch. You supported me on a little event I did here in Abilene for a New Year run. Yeah. And then, so that's where sort of our connection connected with my kids, and they love it. And Connor still talks about, he still loves Brantley Gilbert to this day. So he talks every time he hears him on the radio, he's like, hey, he was still really young, but he still knows, like, hey, that was the guy we talked to on the FaceTime and all that. Yeah. And so just let everybody know that was sort of how we got connected. And it was really a very cool family experience. And we appreciated that and everything that you've done so far. I do want to make it out to Georgia and, check out the area out there. And I know you're posting you're always talking about the Masters when you're out there with that stuff and all you got going on in the Georgia area, but we'll make a trip out there too. But anyways, you hit the military, your hardship going through that, your mom as one of your big heroes.
Absolutely.
What else do you have? Can you expand on your mom for your heroes a little bit more, and then maybe some other hardships, or what else?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Growing up, obviously, as you can attest to in some of the posts that you do a phenomenal job with, as far as Alpha Dad and some of the things that you touch on as far as setting the positive and appropriate example for our kids, right? Growing up, my mom was a teacher. She was a teacher for over 30 years. I think it was 32 years. And just the example and the positive reinforcement of the things growing up, kind of set us up, or it set me up for success as far as understanding, giving back, and, just being able to put other people in a position to get some joy, right? So that growing up and having that mindset and that example from my mom easily was a transition that I incorporated into my lifestyle once I joined the military from day one, to be quite honest with you. It's funny that you mentioned that, right? I have this green book that I started keeping notes, or kind of just memories, if you will, from my very first base in Turkey. And it kind of just led me to keep taking cool notes. I have a green book for my entire 20-year experience. And then I have a whole separate book for my year when I deployed with the Army to Afghanistan. But looking back on some of those things, the 9/11 tragedy, or just highlights of my career of being able to play baseball for the military, or kind of going back to your point of, having the opportunity to go play poker across the country. Yeah, I mean, just from my mom's perspective, or from a growing up and her leading by example, set me up for success, right? And then obviously, even from one of our core values from the Air Force, attention to detail, her philosophy of being able to pay attention to detail and just get things done and be locked into the moment, obviously was an easy transition when I joined the Air Force and throughout my entire career. A caveat to that, right? Kind of like what you mentioned, as far as hardships, leadership from my perspective is progressive, right? We can't lead internally the same way we led 20 years ago, and we can't lead those same people from 20 years ago the same way we would today. Everybody evolves, everybody gets smarter, everybody has their own individual and team dynamics or personal experiences. So we have to, as leaders, adapt and be able to understand that things evolve. You individually, I individually evolved, and then our troops, or the people that we're leading, depending on what the circumstances and the situations are, we might not be able to lead them the same way we did just 5 years ago, last year, or even last week, right? And it's based on us learning and getting better, as well as the people that we're leading. But yeah, I mean, obviously it's a case by case scenario, but being able to form your own, or being able to form my own leadership philosophy, and being able to navigate some of those leadership challenges. I mean, it's a welcome hardship, but it's definitely a challenge.
Nice. Yeah, I love it, because that was one of the, I say, failures I had as a new leader. Is I came in with a leadership mentality, and I tried to lead off of that, like my way, right? Like when I was a young flight commander for the AFE shop, Aircrew Flight Equipment Shop here at Dias, I remember coming in very, can't remember leadership styles. There's like a few leadership styles, but very just like, just straightforward, right? I was like, hey, this is how I lead. This is what we're going to do. But it was sort of needed. But at the same time, I didn't adapt as soon as I needed to the flow of the shop. So as the shop was evolving and growing, I sort of stuck in my way, and I didn't sit back and go, hey, but I was learning, like, just like you said, my toolbox was really small when I became a flight commander. That was like lead by PT, lead by, showing up on time, lead by, I don't know what, those three sort of leadership flags. But now I have a lot more that I can pick and choose from. But that's how we learn, and I got feedback from the people there that were like, hey, we appreciate you coming in and being real hard on PT, but we've done PT for a few months, like let's okay, cool. I got that. And I look back at that time and I still talk to those airmen and I'm always just like, hey, I'm sorry guys. And but they're like, hey, we knew too. We knew you were young. We knew who you were because they saw me as a flyer when I'd come through, so they knew what to expect. And that's a great leadership hardship. Is leading is not easy.
Right.
And that's what's crazy. But that's what I love about it. It changes everywhere you go.
Yeah.
Like, no, you can't lead the same anywhere. Like, I can't lead the same with my kids, with my wife, with the people I work with. And it can be different for my kids every day.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And that's the same thing that we go through, or I've been through for sure.
Yeah.
Nice. No, that's awesome.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay. So that's really good. So let's talk about my big area of focus is going to be when you were you talked about having that passion with your daughter to start Operation Teammate. Who did you have as mentors and resources? Because I've seen, and what I've sort of been doing now is networking to figure out who runs a nonprofit. How do I meet with this person? So what did you guys do then? How did that evolve? What did you learn from it? And how do you apply that now to, I guess, the business side of the app that you're running?
Yeah. Well, from a business starting the business perspective, to be quite honest with you, I came up with the concept or started trying to figure out how to start a nonprofit in the summer or right before the summer of 2014. And it was one of those situations to where I had no clue of what to do, didn't have any business background, but I knew I had a drive and a passion to do something. Okay. So, but it was, to be quite frank and transparent with you, it was frightening. And what I mean by that is it was a completely unknown and an area that I had zero level of experience. Okay. So I did some basic research and really didn't know how to capitalize or execute. So that was the summer of 2014. And then about 6 months went by, and I believe it was December around the holidays or January. And I was like, okay, well, if this is ever going to happen, I need to start and figure it out. Latch on to the people in the community that have been there, done that, and that have the experience within the field that I'm trying to embark on. Okay. So the reason I mentioned that is kind of, I've seen some of the posts that you've mentioned as far as just starting, right? As well as some of the stuff that you talk about within the fitness space as far as moving. Okay. Now, I caveat that to say just because I am moving or just because I am busy, that don't necessarily mean I'm being productive or appropriately moving the train down the track. But moving and putting one foot in front of the other and wanting to be proactive and learning was a big step for me. Very scary, very unknown, but I did it. And so I started doing even more research and just putting the things in order and on all the pieces in motion to get the nonprofit going. And then luckily, going back to your point, as far as mentors or community members that put you in a good, successful position, I got matched up with a lady out of Houston, Texas, that has a nonprofit that supports abused military children. And so her and I had a random phone call, and she told me about a company out of Atlanta that helps folks set up nonprofits from a very basic administrative level, as far as IRS and state regulations and just getting the administrative process going, right? So you can be legal. And so I did all that. And then I started mapping out exactly what our mission was going to be with Operation Teammate, who we were going to do it for, and how we were going to do it. And kind of like I mentioned at the beginning, we didn't really know what we were going to do or how we were going to do it. We just knew who we wanted to do it for. And then we decided on the sports space. So we just started calling sports teams all across the Southeast since I was stationed in South Carolina. Started doing some game day events. And then going back to your point, as far as feedback and then listening to the people around you, we started getting a lot of valuable feedback from the teams as well as the families. And that's where we shifted focus from game day to non-game day, because our ultimate goal is to put the kids in a positive environment and have them feel included, right? That's very important to us, which has went over extremely well. And we continue to get a lot of phenomenal feedback. So my point of saying all that is kind of going back to some of the points that you continue to mention. Just start and keep moving forward, right? Not necessarily just being busy, but being productive with the things that you dedicate your time to, because time goes by in the blink of an eye. There's only so many hours in a day. And then as you're building your team, or at least for us, it was really just me, my mom, and my daughter for the first about 2 years. And then going back to one of your points as far as hardships or challenges, one of my hardships or individual personal challenges is delegation, right? Not to say that I necessarily think or execute from the perspective that I have to do everything myself, but delegating and trusting the team is sometimes a challenge, just because I have my own vision. I just have to be reassured that the team is bought into that particular vision, from a vision or a mission capacity. But we were lucky enough to bring on about 10 more people on our Operation Teammate team over the last couple of years, kind of ambassadors across the nation, as well as one of the football coaches from University of Georgia. He's now at Wyoming. He's in Wyoming now. Yeah. And so you can imagine, just from his perspective or kind of Rolodex of network, he can pick up the phone and have a conversation. And that's where it's kind of led us. Most of our events are within that college football space, which is phenomenal. But kind of going back to one of your points earlier, as far as leading our kids, right? It changes on a daily basis, right? Depending on location, age, boy, girl, or just life interest, right? And that's kind of the point that we kind of make sure that we pay attention to as an Operation Teammate leadership team, because, across the nation, especially in the United States, our most popular sports are your basketball, baseball, football, maybe some soccer, maybe some tennis, right? But what we can't overlook is, we have young ladies that are military children that attend our events. So we're in conversation with the Atlanta Ballet Company out in the Midwest. They have high school rodeo teams, and rodeo is real popular. And the point of me mentioning that is, one, we want the kids to be highly interested and wanting to go to these events, but to be getting something out of the interactions with the athletes, and obviously feeding off of the athlete's success journey. A big caveat to all of that is, it's not necessarily our goal to motivate a child to play a sport. It's to put them in that positive environment and learn those athlete tangible or even or intangibles that athletes learn growing up in that athletic space: the teamwork, the followership, the leadership, the time management, especially at the collegiate level. And it's worked over well, right? It's worked out well. Moving forward, part of what we want to do is kind of build in what we kind of consider a pen pal scenario, to where some of the athletes, when and where appropriate, kind of piggyback after the events and kind of keep tabs, or quote unquote hold the children accountable to what they are wanting to do in life. Not to say that things can't change, but when we interact, or when our kids interact with the athletes get out of our events just as much as our kids do, because the athletes love supporting the community and hearing our military kids' stories.
Yeah, I'll jump in there really quick with a couple big points. One, my cousin played baseball for the Air Force too, and I feel like it was pretty close to right around when you played, which is a crazy story. So he had pictures posted in playing in Yankee Stadium and stuff like that when he played. And I think it was around 2000, maybe late 2000s is when he played, I think. Anyways, random story there. But I wanted to tie in the athlete side. So obviously, me playing college athletes as a military guy, I got to see some of the interactions with the athletes in the military world, and it's just a great connection. it's not just for the kids sometimes, but for the athletes, because they may have no idea what the military does.
Right.
Especially in places like Georgia where there are really big bases. Or I use Abilene, for instance, here because my son some of his best friends are college athletes here in Abilene. And it's just a crazy connection because I look at it from their level, from the college kids, like what college kids, they're learning about the military, right? So they may never even see this experience. So you're providing the college kids that eye-opening experience of, oh man, hey, like this kid, his dad's, gone because they may have never went through that.
Right.
So it's not just, you bring in, you're not just connecting the kids with other like military familiarities, right? You're providing them opportunities where the other side is developing that passion as well. You're sort of opening up the community to the military too, to show
Absolutely.
them what it's like to be a military kid or to have your family gone for a long time. But I tell you, what we have here in Abilene, and it's very similar. So my son has been picked up from school by the college basketball players here from Hardin-Simmons, which is a really cool experience. And I tell him, I'm like, son, you need to relish this because he's 9 and he gets to sit on the bench of an HSU basketball game. So a D3 college basketball team, he gets to sit on the bench during the game. He got to go in the locker room with them. And I'm like, dude, you don't understand like the insight that is to the athletic world, because I didn't get to see college sports until I was, and I say this all the time, in high school. I don't even think I saw a college game when I was going through high school. Like, so like for him to be 9, to see that world, to build these relationships. Like we went to the HSU graduation here because he knew a kid that was graduating. Like I didn't know anybody. I knew Jackson and the other kid just from my son talking about him all the time. So like you're providing, and I love the pen pal thing. I think that's really cool. Because you're providing that follow-up, that connection, that just like for the kid to have somebody else to talk to, where they may just want to ask those random questions where just somebody who's not in the military, and then the athlete can, ask those questions too with, like, hey, what does your dad do? What does your mom do? And maybe they're thinking about the military too, because that's a pretty critical point for those college athletes too, that are playing sports, to be like, hey, there's more to life than sports.
Absolutely.
And I like that. That's cool.
No, yeah. And kind of piggybacking off of your last exact point, as far as there's more to life than just sports, part of the philosophies or part of the messaging that we encourage our athletes to talk about is what are they doing to set themselves up once athletics is not their main or primary focus in life, because the reality is that every athlete has to become a former athlete at some point, and it will happen. So some of the former athletes that we have at our events or that we're lucky enough to interact with, that's some of the messaging that we encourage them to kind of speak to our kids about, just based on the fact that everyone has to become a former athlete at some point. And what did you do to put yourself in the best successful position to make that transition? Very similar to going from active duty or military to civilian, but just in that athletic space.
Nice. All right, I got another question for you. Okay, so you already mentioned, you talked about the mentors to see people in business. What traits did the military teach you to go into business? So like, what can you remember that you took from the military that you've applied in the nonprofit community and then in the business side? What are some one-liners you can throw out there?
Oh yeah, that's easy. Just from a team dynamic perspective, right? One, it's a team effort, right? Absolutely. The whole business venture is an absolute team effort, right? Us as founders, we have visions and we have objectives that we want to accomplish within our business, either that be a traditional business like the app business that we just started, or even from a nonprofit perspective. They're both businesses, just in different respects, right? But we can't do it all ourselves, and we all bring different experiences and different levels of skill set to the team. So I might have an IT background or even a leadership background, but I'm not going to be able to develop an application, or I might not be an expert marketer, or my administrative skills overall just might not be as strong as someone that has 20 years or more of administrative experience. So building that right team and understanding that my strengths and weaknesses need to be compatible with other team members' strengths and weaknesses is a big thing that I learned from the military that has 100% clearly transitioned into the business world.
Yeah, one thing I didn't preface before this episode I always do is my dogs are going crazy. We just got to roll with it.
Yeah.
Like the one thing with outsiders is always really nice, but I have no idea what they're going to do when it comes like playing or barking. So we'll pretend like they're not.
I don't see anything.
Yeah, one of the things I wanted to bring up and literally just reiterate again is the same spot we are in now. So my partner, I call him now, but since we're pretty set on this nonprofit and friend, he is scared. He's nervous because he brings up a great concept. The military is 1% of the population. If you're in the military and you only know people in the military, you only know potentially 1% of the community you live in. And so he's in this mindset because he only has a couple years left. I need to start knowing more people because if I get out and I don't have the military, like who do I have to know? And and the reason we make I say a good business duo is I'm pretty social. I know quite a few people in Abilene. I've gotten my foot out there. We went to an event yesterday, a luncheon where we got to hear the founder of the Carlton Ritz Hotel. His name's like Luce Schwartzel. I just butchered it, but he reiterated the same things you just reiterated when starting a business. If you have an idea, you need to find the market people you're interested in. What do they want from it? Then you take what they want, you bring it back to your idea, and then you make it better than the competitors you're competing against. And we were like, man, that seems so easy. Like, we have an idea, like you did. We want to create this. Okay, now we need to see what do our customers or the people that we are interested in want. We have to go in their shoes, right? They want this. They want an organization. They want a community. Okay, how do we take that? Now, how do we employ it better than the other competitors? Right now, there's not really much competitors in what we're in, which is sort of nice, but we want to make it better. And then the guy talked about usually your customers want a few things and they're not that difficult. They want a quick service. They want no defects, or problems, and they want relationships. They want to be treated well. And we're like, man, that seems so easy. And then he also talked about a crazy concept, not a concept, but when it comes to companies onboarding or hiring people, a lot of companies fail because they hire to fill positions. They don't hire the person, and then the position or whatever will come later. Because there's a lot of businesses where they'll hire people and those people will quit. And then they're like, the business is like, oh, why'd you quit? Well, you hired them. You probably hired them to fill a position, right?
Right.
A chair is filling a position for somebody to sit in. But we should be looking at onboarding people, the person themselves, because then you can mold, right, the technical skills. It's the soft skills you're looking at. But then we also had a crazy question. What most people aren't applying, right, for the person. They're applying for the position. So how do you find that balance of hiring people or finding them? Yeah, that sweet medium. Hey, relax. Hey, stop. Go sit down. Go sit. Go.
No, you're 100% right, man. And not to get off track too much, but it kind of goes back to that team or athletic dynamic, right? I'm sure you've seen or at least heard of this elite athlete that gets traded from one team to the other. But when he gets there a year or two later, and I have a perfect example, I'm not going to call him out, but then he gets traded again. And then another 2 or 3 years, he gets traded again. And then another 2 or 3 years, he gets traded again. And oh, by the way, he's on the way to being a Hall of Fame player, and he's in the highest of categories every year in all the stats, either league-wide or even team-wide. But my point of recognizing that is he might not, or she might not necessarily be the right fit for the team. Team dynamics, even if you might not necessarily have the highest of skill sets, is so important in making sure that everybody morale is a huge piece. Because if you see somebody that is quote unquote better than everybody and getting potential favored, having favoritism or getting treated so extremely different than another team member or the majority of the team, the morale is going to be affected. To include, if that person that has the highest of skill sets does not have the appropriate mindset or attitude to mesh well with the team, it is going to be, again, a huge hardship. And having that team dynamic and figuring out who meshes well together, either emotionally or even skill set wise, is one of the hardships that I've had to overcome. Because like you kind of mentioned, right, we need a marketing person. Okay, well, let's just hire the first marketing person that wants to help us. Might not necessarily be the right fit for the team, and they might not necessarily have the most appropriate marketing skills for where we're at with our business, but we filled that spot. So we have to kind of step back sometimes and just be humble enough to understand that the team comes first and that we need to find the appropriate people to mesh well within the team dynamics as well as to fit the appropriate role. Because every team, from a business perspective, needs a marketing expert. Okay. But unfortunately, the reality is that finances plays a part when it comes to marketing. So we might not be able to hire somebody with 20 years of marketing experience, and we don't have the budget to throw $10,000 a month to social media ads. Okay. So we might have to find someone else that costs a little less based on our budget, either operationally or internally or externally. And then be able to make sure that that person that we're bringing on the team fits within the team dynamics with everybody else. Because as you obviously already mentioned, leadership is a challenge, and sometimes it's lonely, and it's an ever evolving kind of progressive process finding those appropriate fits. I know
think
that's
one
kind
thing,
of all over the place.
yeah, I think one thing to tie in there that you mentioned earlier, which I really liked, is if you have a very good vision and mission and purpose to your job or your organization, the right people are going to apply, right? And that's
Yeah.
one thing we talked about this morning. We're like, hey, if we have a good vision, and I think that's what the other guy mentioned too, if your company is ran well, they have good core values or non-negotiables, those like intricacies that make them run, right? Like the military has, integrity first, service for self. If people see that and they want you to be part of that, you'll get good people to apply.
Yeah.
And you hit it on the head pretty well is, hey, when you have a good, and that's what we're in the process right now, is like, we were just texting each other today, some like vision and mission statements of what we want to do and how we want to do it. Because, and I've been around some squadrons where I've seen some pretty bad vision and mission statements, and I've seen it overused a lot too in the military, right? Because that's sort of like, it's weird. It's like something you have to have. And I was always like negative about it. Like, hey, here's a new squadron, new commanders coming in. Let's change the mission statement, right? And what's it going to be? What catchy phrase are they going to come up with this time? So it never bought in.
Yeah.
And it takes time. And that's why the military is tough with those, because commanders rotate every 2 to 3 years. People rotate every 2 to 3 years. So to build a culture, you can't physically build a good culture with 2 to 3 year rotations in jobs and people and leadership. You have to have like mini cultures that come and go. And that's what I'm working right now with my squadron, as my commander is asking me for feedback on how I see the squadron going. And I was like, and we're very blessed in our organization to have people stay for 5 to 7 years where we can build good culture. Or if it's not good, sort of you're trying to fix it. And so I will ask a lot of my airmen and NCOs in meetings, because we have professional development seminars. One of the challenges I ask them is like, hey, go back to your squadron. Because in an OSS, we have like 7 different flights that make up our squadron. So you don't have one culture. You have 7 different cultures supporting the vision of the OSS. So I always challenge our flights. Hey, senior NCOs or tech sergeants, go back to your shops, ask your airmen what the culture is. Because they should know. The lowest level should know the culture because they're running it day to day. It should start from the bottom, and the senior NCOs are providing it growth, right? They're giving it the sunshine. The foundation is through the lower levels. If they don't know it, like you got some work to do. Or if they're like, and I ask another person, I'll ask you, how do you know when the culture isn't good? What do you see? What are some things you've noticed if you've seen it before?
Oh yeah. It kind of goes back to what I just mentioned as far as how people interact and how, if that meshing is materializing, right? Obviously you don't want to quote unquote jump to conclusions, or kind of like what you just mentioned. You have to give it time, right? Building a philosophy or building an internal culture, either team, business, military, wherever, unfortunately it takes time, right? And the reality of that is, within the business aspect, especially just starting out, you or me, unless you come across, lucky enough, a huge pot of money, you're not going to be able to go out and hire, for $100,000 a year, somebody that has that level of leadership, or in one case, marketing experience, to be able to come in and be flexible enough to understand that it's going to take time to build a rapport or a culture with a team. But yes, I mean, we go through it every day. Right now, both Operation Teammate and with the app business, we have really a good core of team leaders or team members, even, that we're able to work well together. Everybody understands their role and the value that they bring to the team, both on a daily basis, and then from an overall arching vision perspective, from Operation Teammate supporting military kids, and then with the app business, within the live video space, and us trying to figure out our appropriate market fit. But one of the things, kind of piggybacking off some of your points, one of the biggest challenges that I personally have had to overcome from a business perspective is, one, no one is ever going to have as much passion for my vision as I do. And really, that's appropriate, right? If I'm not the person that's the most enthusiastic and forward thinking and driven and motivating, to whoever it is that we're interacting with, I might need to do some self-reflection and figure out a more effective way ahead. My challenge at first was, why is everybody not as motivated and enthusiastic as I am and wanting to work on this 20 hours a day like I want to, right? So that was a challenge that I had to overcome. And then another challenge in that same lane was, why is it that I'm having to reach out to 10 people a week to try to educate them on our mission, and then I never hear anything back from them? What really needs to happen is we build that internal team culture and then external team branding to show people what we stand for and our core philosophies as far as supporting military children. And then, like you mentioned earlier, the right people will come to you, right? And it won't be so much of a challenge to, quote unquote, find the right person. The right people will find you. So the only reason I mentioned that is it's an everyday challenge to find the right people, either from a skill set perspective or even just from a team dynamic perspective. But I get better every day, understanding that, one, it takes time to build that internal team culture, and then branding from a mission set perspective takes time too, and you have to market, and you just have to stick to your guns. I mean, we have core kind of guiding principles very similar to core values in the military, and as long as you kind of hold fast to those and educate and kind of onboard and train using those guiding principles, the team culture, or at least from a business perspective for us, has been able to materialize.
Yeah. What was I gonna say? Down to my tongue. Oh man. Anyways, we'll jump into, he'll come back to me in a little bit. So let's dive into, so I have developed sort of like my leadership philosophy, sort of like core values, lead by example in all you do. To be selfless, you have to be selfish, build relationships based off trust and care, and the challenge road in front of you, getting comfortable, being uncomfortable. Now I'll ask you, which of those have you developed pretty well? And then which of those do you think you need to practice on and can be tough?
Oh yeah. Well, the last one that you just mentioned, as far as being comfortable, being uncomfortable, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's a challenge. That's a challenge for me. I try to be educated. I try to be motivated and comfortable when I'm interacting with people or executing any business in life, both personally and professionally. but especially kind of going back when I first started Operation Teammate, right? It was a very uncomfortable situation. And to be quite honest, I kind of put it on the back burner. I don't want to say that I quit, because we've came a long ways and done a lot of good over the last, 2 handfuls of years. But in that uncomfortable situation, even though I was comfortable diving into the potential of Operation Teammate, I was not appropriately able to be comfortable being uncomfortable. I've gotten a little better at it. And sometimes you just kind of have to take the leap of faith and be comfortable being uncomfortable, right? You have to be comfortable and confident in your experience and where you're at, in this case, in the business venture or roadmap, if you will. Kind of a great example of this is we get not necessarily Operation Teammate, but with the app business, we got selected to go pitch in Philadelphia at a veteran Shark Tank. Very similar to the TV show, but it was for the military, and it's hosted every year in December in Philadelphia. And I was like, okay, well, I'm very comfortable talking about the app, and I'm more than happy to go tell people about the app. But I didn't really think that we were at that appropriate stage of business for us to be able to go appropriately pitch in this competition for $50,000. So I was very uncomfortable, even though I decided to do it because I was blessed and, I was lucky that we got chosen. But it was a huge challenge putting myself out there and being confident and comfortable enough in a very awkward, uncomfortable, and new scenario, because it's a new business venture. A lot of the business principles and foundational pieces from Operation Teammate translate over to your for-profit world. But it was a brand new business venture, and I had never gotten on stage and pitched what we're trying to do with this live video streaming application. But I did it, and I worked through it and learned a lot. That's the biggest thing from my perspective, is being open enough to be able to learn from it. And obviously we go through different trials and ups and downs and challenges throughout our military career. And sometimes you kind of have to force yourself, or at least I had to kind of force myself, again, going back to your one of your philosophies, being comfortable, being uncomfortable.
What traits do you have, or that you saw on my list, that were new to you, that you didn't know, or that you could add? If you got a couple off the top of your head.
Yeah. Well, I can't reach it. Give me a couple of them. I've read it.
I'll talk. You're good. Did you want to go grab it?
Well, I can't reach it. Just, go ahead.
Yeah. So one of the things I'll cover really quick that you mentioned, you talked a lot about time. So time is tough, like in perspective for a lot of people. Like, is there a limit to it? Like a lot of people expect time to be the same for everything. Like, is it 30 days for this? Is it 30 days for that? So one of the traits I love that I've learned is 30, 60, 90 rule. And this applies to our own change, but it really applies to a business. It takes 30 days, and the time can be flexed depending on your goal. 30 days to build like the habit, right? Or the routine. 60 days for you to see the change or the growth, 90 days for everybody else to see it. And I saw this personally in my journey when I was doing 75 hard a few years ago, and I was crushing it. I was just like, just going hard. I remember one day I went to my wife and I was like, babe, like, how is nobody like, I want to say just like saying like, good job, Manny. Like, you're crushing it, like, or just when I was trying to put myself out there as an online coach, I was like, man, why am I not getting people to be like, hey, I want to do what you're doing? And she was like, well, for one, it takes people longer to get uncomfortable to ask for help and to give praise. And two, they need to really see you do it for longer. And it's brought up on a bunch of my episodes where we talk about most people are not used to seeing people succeed, right? So they're used to seeing people start a business or start a journey. And then after a couple of weeks or months, they sort of they sort of get quiet. They go back to the way they were, and they didn't make it, And that's just the way society sort of shows us doing a lot of things. So when we have to show success, it takes a lot longer. And it takes a lot longer for the people that we sort of want, even though we shouldn't be worried about them. It's the other people. to sort of let us know like, hey, I'm watching you, or hey, good job, keep it up. Like for me, it's almost been 3 years in this journey where I've gotten people that are like, hey, I've noticed what you're doing. I'm like, finally, geez, man, I've been doing this like every day. Like
Yeah.
for my airmen that go on my rucks with me, I've been rucking for 3 years, and there are some airmen who are just now being like, oh man, I really love what the rucks are doing. I'm like, good. Now come keep doing it, like that's what I need you to do. And so it's just one thing I want people to realize. Time is it's not easy. You have to, I almost say, multiply more than what you expect it to be from. So if you think you're going to see something in a month, multiply it even more later on down the road. And that was one thing I wanted to cover right there.
No, and that's phenomenal, right? And I struggled with that exact same point, right? And I think I have gotten better anticipating someone recognizing either not necessarily my accomplishments, but the process that we continue to execute, right? And it's funny that you mentioned that, right? I think I have learned, or at least have gotten better at kind of blocking out the noise and sticking to the process, right? And the reason I mentioned that or emphasize that is, to me, it kind of goes back to telling the truth, right? If you tell the truth within a conversation that you're having with someone, you don't even have to remember what you said. And if that's your internal motivation and your culture of how you conduct life business, and you're honest and you're a positive and respectful person, you don't even have to remember 3 or 4 years later if what you told someone was the truth, because that's always how you conduct business. And the reason I correlate that with what your points were as far as being recognized or someone mentioning that they see your efforts is, over the last handful of years that I've been doing Operation Teammate since I retired, as well as the new for-profit app business, I get emails and phone calls and random text messages out of the blue from people that I either absolutely do not know or haven't spoken with literally in years, of them saying, hey, I see what you're doing with Operation Teammate. I see what you're doing with the app. What can I do to get involved? How can I support you so you can continue getting better, right? Which, that to me, is not necessarily that I strive for validation, because I know I'm doing the right thing, but that is validation that I'm doing the right thing, because random people reach out, and the way they are communicating is showing me that I'm doing the right thing.
Yeah, one thing I struggle with, and this I feel like it's from the military, and I know it is, the need for feedback on validation. So my coach in the first form community or job I work for, they are very big on, and it's just the way they run their program, is they don't like provide a lot of feedback on like running the script and help people in the app where I coach, stuff like that. So like when I have a one-on-one call with them, I'll get on and be like, hey Jake, how am I doing, man? Like, what do you got for me? Like, and he's just like, okay. And I'm like, no, like the military has taught me, when we meet and you are my like supervisor, you tell me how good I'm doing or how bad I'm doing so I can make adjustments. And it's like it's hard. And so I've had to sort of do what you're doing, just trust the process. The proof is in the pudding, right? As long as I'm truthful, I know I'm doing the right thing, I know I'm putting in the work, it's going to happen. And I tell a lot of my clients that, and weight loss is a very simple analogy for this. If you want the results in weight loss, you have to do the work. And you're not going to get a lot of people that are telling you you're doing a good job losing weight. You just got to keep doing it. And one day someone's going to reach out to you and be like, man, you've lost a lot of weight. Keep it up. And you're just like, whoo. Even though you're doing the right thing. But like you said, you're not validating it because it's honest. It's the right way. And I think it's good for me to hear from somebody else, because then I'm not like the only one like, man. And I think that ties into the imposter syndrome, right? Which is a huge thing that we talk about a lot in the social media world, because in the social media world, we rely on feedback, right? Clicks, views, likes. And so when you don't get it, you're like, every video I post or story I share, I'm always just like, was it good? Was it bad? How do I know? But if I'm honest and there's good intent good meaning behind everything I do, I know in the end, people are going, people are going to learn. They're going to be educated. They're going to be entertained, and it's going to provide value. That's what we have to rely on.
Absolutely, man. And then kind of a huge caveat, or almost a different piece of that whole puzzle, at least for me, right? And y'all might potentially be exposed to this particular scenario as y'all move forward with your nonprofit. One of the biggest things that I and our team has come across is that we have all these people that are saying that we're doing great and that they want to be involved, right? And a remedy for me that works for me of how I see how much they actually do like what we're doing is I empower them to take on a piece of the puzzle. And if they run with it and are being productive to bring value to the team, okay, they're all in.
Yeah.
But a lot of the time, unfortunately, I hear, hey man, you're doing great. Hey man, keep me posted. Hey, let me know how I can get involved. Hey, this is how you can get involved. We can start today. Oh man, I don't have time for that. Okay.
Yeah, there's a good Instagram audio that's like someone comes up to you and goes, "Hey man, why aren't you famous yet?" or something with all your posts. And then you go, "Have you shared any of my posts?"
No.
And it's like, no. It's like, yeah.
Yeah.
Like it's that simple. It's like, yeah, it's funny. Like same thing I say social media side for me, like my sort of business, Be like, hey man, keep crushing it, and then I'll be like, and I'll know, oh, you haven't shared, like, or like I do have people that do, and but yeah, it's interesting. But let's see here. We'll bring it in here in a couple minutes because those are some great topics covering. Just to reiterate to everybody what we sort of went over pretty quickly, 30, 60, 90 time, truth in the process. I do like how you talked about those conversations. If they're meaningful, you don't have to like in the military, and I don't know if you've ever had the flying, we talk about penguins on the iceberg, right? If I'm worried about a lot of things, I have too many penguins on the iceberg, I need to kick some penguins off so I can focus on other things. If I'm having meaningful and trustful relationships, those penguins, I can like kick out to sea and not worry about it. They can go do their thing. They can go to another island, and I can focus on other things because I know I'm not worried about that in the back of my mind if I meet that person again, and I look at him and I go, oh man, I think last time we talked, but if it was truthful, I can come up to him and maybe I forgot what we talked about, but I know it was impactful.
100%.
Nice.
I love it.
Let's one more question, then we'll go into your book. So for anybody out there that's wanting to get into that side of the business or nonprofit, we've already given tons of tips. What last meaningful tip do you have? Or if you want to reiterate one you said before, what would you say?
For someone that's contemplating or just has an idea that they think they want to start a business around, my biggest point would be go join your local chamber of commerce. And the reason I mentioned that, it kind of captures a lot of the different aspects that you might need to be exposed to start a business, either from a networking perspective, local community professionals, and then just various seminars or classes or information that the Chamber of Commerce can give you to kind of put information in the back of your mind to help you feel comfortable being uncomfortable executing that initial business process.
Nice. That's cool. I love it because that's where we're at right now. Like I've went to a leadership development seminar here in Abilene. I'm trying to get involved with the nonprofit. So I'm trying to work with nonprofits on a board to see what a nonprofit is like. Because I've found the nonprofits, when they have a board, they're not necessarily hiring for men on their board. They're trying to get people from outside to support their board to help run it. And that's where I'm like, oh, I think I can bring a good perspective from the military side because we understand meetings, time, management, and it's going to help me learn about nonprofits. So and you bring up the commerce, and like I've met a couple people here in Abilene already that are on that process, and I'm like, okay. And I'll whisper, like, hey, here's what we're thinking. And they're like, oh, I like it. Okay. Like one guy yesterday, he's like, what's the name of it? And I was like, oh, we don't have a name, but we're learning, and but that's cool. That's good. Perfect. What book are you bringing to the table today for everybody out there to get some more knowledge?
Well, the name of the book most recently that has kind of captured my attention is called The Lean Startup. LEAN startup. And really one of the biggest points from that book that has helped me is kind of going back to some of the points that we've talked about today, right? Don't be afraid to start something new, right? And from a lean startup book philosophy perspective, it's specifically talking about within the business venture, don't be so married or focused on your internal or original vision of the business, right? Again, kind of like what you mentioned where y'all are at right now. You have a basic vision. You are trying to figure out the mission and the vision statements, and you understand currently what you want to accomplish. But as we move forward, either internally from a team perspective or even externally from a feedback or data perspective, when you get that quote unquote, either validation or non-validation based on what your current vision is, the point of that philosophy within the lean startup book is don't be afraid to either quote unquote pivot your vision or start something new within that business process. Because if you're just stuck on your vision, again, not to go all over the place, but historically, data shows that about 98% of businesses that are centered around a mobile application fail. Either that be operationally, just because they don't get up off the ground, or financially, where they don't generate that level of revenue to sustain operations. 98%. That's crazy to me. But I think based on research, conversations, and experience, that 98, the largest percentage of that 98% is due to the fact that the founders or the leadership are afraid to try something new. Right. And they're just stuck on their original vision, and they think their vision needs to be what everybody buys into. Right. And it might not necessarily be the case. You don't have to change or pivot your entire business mission or operations. Just incorporate, don't be afraid to incorporate some of the things that might be attractive to your ideal customer.
I love it. That's good. Man, I always like doing this because it always works out where one person's going to bring a book that's very task-oriented execution like you did, and then I will usually, or the other person will bring the opposite book. So most people know, if you've listened to the end of the podcast before, the books I read vary from execute books, and then my like military history, like learning from past experiences of people. So right now I'm reading a book. It's called The Splendid and the Vile, about Winston Churchill and his getting barraged by Germany during World War II, and how he sustained and maintained that community and country. And it's cool because you're learning from the people in the past that have done it. So it's really cool that you brought the book that's execution, go do, and then I'll try to bring in a book that's, hey, history, it's done before. So 2 great books. Yeah, man, that's perfect hour, Mark. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Really quick, I will get with you after. I will add all your follow-up info in the show notes. But if there's any way for anybody to quickly reach out to you that's listening and wants to, what's one easy way they can reach out to you?
Yeah, for Operation Teammate, you can go to operationteammate.org. All of our contact information is on there. All of our social media handles are on there. And if you're a military family that wants to get involved, a very quick and easy family sign-up form, and we will be in contact with you once we receive your form. Yeah,
I highly recommend those listening for the military families do it. It's amazing.
Thank you.
This came from this podcast. And I will emphasize, you've also motivated me and challenged me for my book too, because when we were talking back and forth, I think you were just like, you should write a book. I'm like, what? Who writes a book? Like, I don't know how to do that. But it's the same way with Operation Teammate, your app, my podcast.
Absolutely.
I've done it. I have a Word document on my computer. It's like 15 or so pages right now, where I'll just throw snippets of my career in, just like your little book. And my goal is to capture my career and then take my leadership traits and sort of like sprinkle them in throughout. And I have a little green book as well that I have all my leadership traits in that I add to and I reference. And yeah, so I just want to say thank you as well. Thank you
Yes,
for
sir.
the motivation, helping me get uncomfortable with everything
No,
we're
thank
doing
you. I
as
appreciate
well.
it. No, yes, sir. I appreciate it. Obviously, you and your phenomenal family uh, are a testament to leading from the front, like you continue to mention. And we're just appreciative of being involved. And I appreciate the opportunity to be on your podcast.
Cool. All right, man. Hang around for a little bit. We'll get the final episode